Hey y'all, welcome to the weekly live cast sermonizing event for Greater Purpose. Y'all, this radical nonviolent group of revolutionaries of all sexual and gender identities. I am so glad that y'all are here because today I have a surprise, and it's not just my blurry face. There we go. I have a surprise for you. That's right. Y'all, here it is. You ready? Isn't she lovely? You see that? That's our beer. That's not just any beer. I mean, I love all beer, but I especially love this one because our church made it, y'all. That's right. Our brewery is officially here. What was formerly known as East Cliff Brewing Company is now Greater Purpose Brewing Company in Santa Cruz. This is exciting. We've been waiting an additional 15 months for this, and after blood and sweat and literal tears, y'all, rolling down my cheeks, that we've poured into this work for months and months, after hitting wall after wall and after breaking through the shit show that has been this pandemic and just 2020 in its entirety, our church finally has a brew pub that will donate a portion of its profits to local charities like Save Our Shores, the local chapter of the NAACP, the Homeless Garden Project, the Diversity Center, and yes, even Planned Parenthood, because unlike most churches, we believe that a woman has the right to govern her own damn body. Now, this is a dream come true for me, and there are so many thanks in order, y'all. First and foremost, we got a toast that's in order to the matriarchs of this church. Y'all, if you came to Greater Purpose when I became the pastor, you missed out on decades of two very sweet people keeping the church afloat. And that was Velma Walton and Pat Robertson. And we cannot thank them enough. And sadly, they have passed from this realm, but know that their memory and their love for this church and their community here in Santa Cruz is going to live on in the work that we continue to do, so much so that we named two beers after both of them. So we have It's Pat on the Way and Velma's Hat, because if you had the luxury of knowing Miss Velma, you know that she loved her church hats, and those are going to be on tap at the brewery soon. So if you had the pleasure of knowing these sweet souls, you got to come toast to their memory. So also, speaking of toast, we got to give a cheers, ka-cha, to the board of directors for Greater Purpose and for our local leadership in the denomination of the Disciples of Christ, because they're the ones that allowed us to sell the property and invest in a new venture. So hats off to them and to our staff and volunteer leadership, because they encouraged this wild idea from the beginning and they put up with my crazy ideas. So y'all, I know it's been rough. It's been a wild ride, but oh my God, how it was worth it. And we also got to thank the person that's making the beer, because it's not me. So when I started this church, I had this amazing musician that was a part of our band who plays an instrument called a bandura, which has 55 strings, but he's also a killer bass player, and he played both for our worship services. Come to find out, Mike has a bit of a talent for making some good brew. So when I was thinking about how we could revision what was going on in the church, Mike and I thought about a brewery, because his beer is that good. You should try it as well. We got to thank James, the owner of East Cliff Brewing Company, for being willing to sell to Greater Purpose. Thanks so much, James. Your presence in this whole process has just been so valuable, and know that those delicious English-style recipes are staying on for sure, especially that Irish red, y'all. I'm Irish. That's the best I've ever had. And finally, we got to thank a lady that some of you may remember. She was very, very quiet and to herself, always just a sweet person to be around. But if you remember back when we could actually safely gather for worship, there was a lady named Miss Molly, and Miss Molly is friends with James. And when we released the sad news that we weren't going to be downtown, Molly actually connected Mike and I to James to discuss taking over that space and that brewery. And y'all, without Miss Molly, we'd be up a creek. Matter of fact, Miss Molly Stout, you can have that on tap now. We named a beer after her too. Y'all, this is just all so exciting, and it's coming at us 100 miles an hour. And when I had a moment to breathe, which there's been few this week because we're in the middle of a remodel. I was reminiscing about this whole journey and about where it all began, y'all. Now, locals know about where our church was and where the former building of our congregation still is. They know that facility really well because the entire west side was built around this earlier congregation that had met there in the 1900s, and then our church, I think, rebuilt it in the 60s. So it's been a part of that neighborhood for a while. And when I became the pastor of the church, we kind of really amped up this community center vision for the space. And it was just an absolute joy to be there and be a part of that neighborhood. We made some really good relationships with folks. But unfortunately, some things just don't work out, no matter how much you would like them to, because that building, as much as we loved it, was super expensive to maintain. And honestly, if there ever would have been one expensive, maybe mechanical issue in the future, we would have been up a creek because we didn't have hardly any money in the bank. And this was a constant cloud of stress and anxiety swirling over my head and over the head of the board members. So when we were thinking about what we could do, we thought, hey, let's reinvest the money from this property that's literally drowning our bank account in expenses, and let's reinvest that into a new venture. And that's where this crazy idea for a nonprofit fundraising philanthropub came into play. So it was just this amazing idea that we actually get to see coming to fruition now. And it's so awesome. But it didn't come without its own set of issues, right? Because we thought we were going to be open months ago, 2 years ago, actually. And we thought that we had found this ideal location in the heart of downtown Santa Cruz. But once we had gotten everything designed, all the furniture picked out, the menus made, everything, unfortunately, we ran into a major plumbing issue that was unforeseen to our contractors at the time, and it would have cost us an additional $1.4 million, I think, to build the brewery downtown, and we were devastated. 2 years of work just out the window. And the staff and Mike and myself, we have just been struggling with staying motivated and battling some depression in some ways. But y'all, gosh, it makes it so worth it now that it's finally here. And if you go to the space now, excuse the mess. It's not permanent. We're sprucing up that space as I speak. It's going to look amazing. And then shortly after that, we're going to implement our system for fundraising for nonprofits, where each customer can cast their vote where they would like their portion of the profits to go to. So this is all just very, just energizing to be a part of this. One of my staff members told me this week, this is just, it's life-giving. This is what we needed. But oddly enough, there are people that aren't happy about what we're doing, and the only people that really genuinely hate this idea, for the most part, are Trump-supporting Christians. Let me put on the surprise beard. Yeah, not shocked. Y'all, and it strikes me as odd that of all the people that could be frustrated with this, it would be Christians. Because, their choice for their presidential candidate is the antithesis of the gospel. But y'all, many are still opposed to this model of church that's going to be raising funds for local charities and not opposed to Donald Trump. It confuses me at times. But I think ultimately what may be causing some of them to just give us a little bit of pushback, it's because people just don't like the idea of change, and they're terrified of the unknown. But Blazing Trails is part of the Christian heritage. It's central to the message of the Gospels. The book of Matthew says this: "Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and people came and said to him, 'Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples don't?' And Jesus said to them, 'The wedding guests can't fast while the bridegroom is with them. As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. But the day will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and on that day they will fast again.' He went on to say, 'No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old cloak. Otherwise the patches they pull apart, and the new from the old make a worse tear. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins, and the wine is lost, and so are the skins. But one puts new wine into fresh wineskins. Now, I love what Jesus is doing here, y'all. I absolutely love it, because Jesus is telling these masses of religious people that God is doing a new thing. Get used to it. Which obviously didn't go over well for Jesus. I don't know if you've read the rest of the story, but I think, part of the reason why some people in the religious community push back against Jesus's teachings is because people love their traditions and their rituals. But the story of God, we have to understand, is this ever-evolving process in the scriptures. I mean, throughout the entirety of the text, the one consistent theme that God seems to be constantly displaying for humanity is you shouldn't get comfortable, because things are going to change. And this truth is one of the most difficult things to get across to people. And that is so frustrating for me when I talk to other Christians. It's been this battle that I've had since I've been in ministry. Like, how can we not have an organ to play our music? And how can we not have pews and hymnals? And how can you say fuck white supremacy from the pulpit? And the answer to that, to all of this, is that I believe that God, or at minimum, this community, is doing a new thing at our church that is based in the concepts of justice and love and inclusivity. So instead of fighting it, let's get excited about it. Let's get on board with it. Grab a paddle. And besides, like hymns and pews and Sunday morning worship and crucifixes on your walls, abstaining from alcohol and using PG language in your sermons, none of that's even in the Bible anyway, but creating a community and opportunities that sow generosity and that cultivate a sense of inclusivity in movements for justice, in movements that call out societal evils and religiosity, those are the most biblical ideals any church can assimilate and emulate. In the text that I read earlier, I love how Jesus pointed out that laws and traditions were made to change. And I think Jesus was saying that because ultimately the purpose of these laws and traditions, matter of fact, Jesus even says this in the Gospels, it was to benefit humanity. But humans did what humans do, unfortunately, and they turned something that was intended to be beautiful into something that was harmful and toxic and oppressive. I mean, in the Old Testament, God said, hey, take a break once a week. Just have a day where you relax. And what humans heard was, I don't care how hungry you are. I don't care how many people you know that are dying of starvation. You better not make your neighbor or yourself a sandwich on the Sabbath. And don't even think about helping a sick or dying person. I mean, that's what religion ended up making. And we see this now. We see people obsessed with their church buildings and not the condition of the welfare of the people that are in those buildings. But Jesus makes this brilliant point about how God places the welfare of humanity above our traditions and our rituals, and that our faith must be relevant within a modern context. And then unfortunately for Jesus, religion did what religious people do, and they turned on him. And I've seen this happen over and over in my own ministry. I mean, people say things like, you can't be a real church without a building. I mean, I'm in a building, but it's not a church, You can't have a brewery or have beer at church. I mean, what about whiskey? I mean, whiskey okay? You can't swear at Nazis in your sermons, Christopher. Why the hell not? You know what? Fuck them. All right? Y'all, because none of those criticisms are in the Bible at all. And the church is being buried beneath the inadequacy of ridiculous regulations that are choking the life out of the incredible message of Jesus. And if we do not change in the American church, progressive or non-progressive, we will perish into the confines of history. And if we can't change and try to embrace teachings that are relevant and beneficial and inclusive and helpful, you know what? Maybe we should perish. Maybe we should. I don't know. Because people are going to fight for the familiar. They are going to stand for what they've always been comfortable with, and they'll do so even if it means destroying the lives of innocents. Because for conservative Christians especially, it's all about rules, isn't it? And it's not just with the church. They do that for society as well. I mean, a lot of evangelicals are really concerned about obeying the law, which is funny to me because Jesus was literally killed by Romans for breaking their unjust laws, but I digress. But in America, the church is so concerned about obeying the law, and it's not concerned about whether or not those laws were ever ethical to begin with. And this simply won't do. When kids are being kept in cages, and as a matter of fact, we can't locate the parents of 540 kids right now in this country that we separated from their parents to begin with. And when they're being torn from their mother's arms indefinitely because their parents did what any good parent would do if they were in danger and their children could possibly be injured, and they sought asylum from their lands that were riddled with violence, then I do not give a fuck if the topic at hand is written in law or not. I do not care who wrote laws that keep people from seeking safe asylum. That law is utter bullshit. And if Jesus were here, Jesus would say the same damn thing. Hell, even prophets of the Old Testament would make the same judgments against the religious. In Amos 5, the prophet declares that God says, I despise your festivals, and I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and your grain offerings, I will not accept them. And the offerings of well-being of your fatted animal, I will not look upon. Take away from me the noise of your songs, and I will not listen to the melody of your harps, but let justice roll like flowing water, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. So, church, as we embrace the new thing, the brewery thing, the fun thing, let us remember that we can't ever be locked into any methodology because we must always stand for the right things and we should be flexible. Which brings us to communion. Now, prior to the Passover meal, this Last Supper that Jesus was partaking in, they had always used the flesh of an animal, but Jesus used bread and grain because it was a protest against Roman taxes, religious corruption, and it was an ingredient at the table that everyone in that society could easily afford. It was an inclusive ingredient. Now, this ritual of the Last Supper, it was once a radically new concept, and it's sadly become this immovable and dogmatic weekly practice for many people. It can't be changed. It has to be there. But communion, for me, I will always hold close to my heart because for me, it's a weekly reminder to embrace change and especially to seek justice, love, have mercy, walk faithfully, and blaze trails if necessary. Blaze trails that have never been traversed before for the good of our planet and all those who are on it. And I hope that it will mean that for you today. So whatever you have near you, to be as inclusive as possible, whether it's bread or whether you're low carb like me and you're using cheese, just grab you a morsel of something. And as we break that together and we have a drink, for me it's whiskey, know that we are a part of a community that is doing amazing things, whether it values the baggage of tradition or not, and that's something to be excited about. It's good cheese. And now, friends, may the revolution of Jesus go with you wherever it may send you. May it guide you in healing this wasteland and protect you through the storm. May it lead you through the world seeking the justice it demands for you and for others. And may it lead you home preparing to continue love's mission beyond your doors. Grace and justice for each and every one of you. Love y'all.